Over the years, I've set up and tested many different Sonos Arc and Arc Ultra configurations, but I think the revolutionary sound technology inside the new Arc Ultra makes the home theater upgrade path change significantly. In this video, I want to walk you through my findings, potential setup configurations, and answer some common questions you might have. Now, I think it's first important to talk about the design changes on the Arc Ultra because a lot of the design changes on it influence the performance of it compared to the regular Arc. And so first, for just physical changes, it is a little bit wider than the Arc, but it is not as deep as the Arc by just a few millimeters. There's also a hard microphone switch on the Arc Ultra. There is also an HDMI, but unfortunately it has no pass-through, which I think is a bit of a downside because normally that will take up the eARC on your TV, and that is the best port for the widest versatility on most TV sets. There is also an RJ45 Ethernet port that works for you to wire it in, but it does work well on Wi-Fi as well. In the two setups that I'm going to be talking about, neither of them is wired in, they are both on Wi-Fi. Even though the dimensions are a little bit different than the standard Arc, it should still fit on most wall mounts. It might just have a little bit more visibility on the wall, depending on which mount you're using for it. It also obviously comes with a power cable and a 6-foot HDMI cable as well. So before we get into the sound performance, I think one thing that's very important to understand is how the sound design came to be in the new Arc Ultra, and that would be through Sonos's acquisition of a company called Mayht. Basically in 2022, they purchased the company for $100 million, and they, in some sorts, revolutionized the speaker design, which has been very stagnant for the past 50 to 100 years, relatively. And what they did is they were basically able to have a 10x size reduction, which reduces the size of the speakers in the Arc Ultra, but allows for many more speakers in the Arc Ultra. And that is why it is now a 9.1.4 system versus the older Arc, which was a much lower speaker count. We'll go into that a little bit when we talk about sound performance. But essentially what this gives is much more sound positionality, which is very relevant for spatial sound, which Sonos is well known for, especially when you're using things like Dolby Atmos in the system. And so reducing the size is able to make them flatter and lighter as well. So I expect this technology will actually have huge implications in the mobile sector, even things like smart glasses and headphones, small speakers, car audio systems. This is an integration that I expect Sonos to actually expand beyond the home theater, and will likely use this Mayht integration into a lot of technologies going forward. So what Mayht called this technology was heart motion, and it is a self-balancing technology. So traditional drivers in speakers create a lot of vibrations in one direction, leading to shaking. The heart motion speakers do not require as much amp power, and they're much better for bass sensitivity, which is, as you'll see when we talk about the Arc Ultra, is one huge improvement from the regular Arc. So it creates more space behind the membrane of the speaker, and more space equals more room to move, which results in good sound and bass. And from what I heard, when Sonos reps heard the heart motion speakers, they instantly offered Mayht $100 million. So that's just to give you an example of how good the technology is and how believable they thought it was. I believe it was two Dutch brothers, Matthias and Timothy. But anyways, Heart Motion got rebranded into Sound Motion, I believe, under the Sonos name. And so Sound Motion is the name of the speakers in the Arc Ultra, but that was originally Heart Motion. So first, I just want to talk about the Arc Ultra by itself as a standalone unit. And then I do want to go into a lot of the configurations that you could add or have with rears, subs, etc., and even fronts. The soundstage is generally much wider than the Arc. It has a significant amount more bass. If I had to put a number on it, I would say it has probably 2x the bass that the Arc has. It's a generally more immersive experience with the top firing speakers after you map the room. We'll talk about the app and the room mapping in a little bit, but after you map the room with the vertical speakers and the tuning that you can do for the specific space that it's in, those do create a much more immersive experience. And the center channel clarity is a lot better than the standard Arc, because there are generally just more speakers in the Arc Ultra. Now, to give you a clearer picture of why as a standalone unit the Arc is better, I do want to just show a little chart here on screen so you can see how many more units of sound are actually in the Arc Ultra compared to the Arc. So you can see quickly the total driver count is much more in the Arc Ultra, and the Arc is a 7.1.4 system, whereas this is a 9.2.4 system. In everything but the mid-bass drivers, which were reduced by 2, you can see a significant increase here, as well as the mid-bass woofer. In terms of pricing, bundling speakers is normally the best way to save. I'll link all these speakers I mentioned below, as the fall is normally when the best savings occur. Now, with YouTube's audio compression and just generally the wide variety of speakers you might be listening to this on, it could be on your cell phone, headphones, computer, desktop, like a TV, for example. I don't think the sound translates whatsoever, so I'm not really going to give any sound comparisons because I find those kind of pointless. But I generally do think you will better spend your money by getting rears first versus getting a sub on the Arc Ultra. The bass performance is good enough in the Arc Ultra where you'll have a much more immersive experience by getting the Era 100s or the Era 300s in the rear, and then maybe upgrading later to a Sub Mini or a Sub Gen 4 to boost that bass performance. If you have a really tiny room where you're putting this in, then get the Arc Ultra, call it a day. I think that's an easy enough decision, and then maybe upgrade later. But I do want to walk you through some of the configurations that you could get if you have a mid-size or maybe an even larger room. So let's dig into that really quickly. So now I just want to walk you through some of the configurations that I think would make the most sense in terms of the upgrade paths that you have with the Arc Ultra. So of course, first, if you have a small to possibly a smaller medium-sized room, just the Arc Ultra will be a very good experience because of that increased bass and these Sound Motion speakers. And so that's going to run you approximately $999. And for most people, this setup here will suffice and will provide significantly better sound than the inbuilt speaker or even your regular average soundbar that's probably in the $200 to $400 price range. Then for the next setup, I think to add more immersion, adding some Sonos 100s in the rear, these will be an extra $200. And so having these in the rear will add that extra level of immersion, and it's not actually going to add too much to the general cost. You're then going to be looking at about $1,400 for this nice package of 3 speakers here. And with the original Arc, I wouldn't have actually recommended this because then you are going to be significantly lacking in bass. But I think because the bass is good on the Arc Ultra, adding these 2 rears here, your money is going to be better put towards that immersion. If you have a small room, this is still a good setup to maybe a medium room. And then you'll see when we go up to larger rooms later, there will be different recommendations. Then the next logical upgrade, I think, is if you put those rears in, is to then get the Sub Mini. And then you're getting to the point where you're at 1820. But if you do want generally a little bit better bass performance, you could actually go with the Sub Gen 4 instead. And then that's gonna run you about $2,200 for the Arc Ultra, the 2 rears of the Era 100s, and then the Sub Gen 4. Also, just FYI, placing the sub under a sofa is something that Sonos has recommended if you're tight on space. This does not work with the Mini, however. I think the Sub Mini, with the combination of the Arc Ultra's good bass and the little Eras for the immersion, is probably the best bang for buck, really good fidelity that you can get. We're going to show some more, but then they start to creep up well past the 2500 range. This is probably the one I'm going to recommend for the best immersion and good bass response. So this here is actually a regular Arc, and this is an example of a relatively big room. You can see we're having the sub and the other speakers in the rear. You can see up here, there's a built-in speaker in the wall. So there's a Sonos amp that is connected to that. And then there's another one right up there. And then you can see, I'll flip the camera. The sub is down here. This is a Sub Gen 3. So for much larger rooms like this, you will definitely want a sub most likely, especially ones that have more complex geometric shapes like that. And even for rooms like this, the Arc Ultra will be more suited because it will provide more bass from the front, and then also it'll provide a much better center channel here than the regular Arc we see here. Now, excuse me, I'm off to play some foosball. And then now we have some of the best setups you can get, and that would be the new Era 300s. These have Dolby Atmos, where they actually can also project sound upwards. And so it's going to give you that kind of sensation of, like, I was watching John Wick the other day, and the bullets seem like they're kind of whizzing right over your head here because of the upfiring speakers on the Arc Ultra, and then also the upfiring speakers here. You get that effect of stuff sounding like it's flying over your head sometimes. But anyways, so that setup is going to be $2,330 with the 2 Era 300s in the rear, and the Sub Mini. And then if you step up instead of the Sub Mini, get the Gen 4, that's going to be about $2,700. So these are both really, really insane setups. Obviously, at this point, it starts to make a little more sense to get the Gen 4 sub because you're going to get better bass performance. But if you're not a huge bass head, then these do provide a little bit of bass, and the Sub Mini and the Arc Ultra will have a decent bass response. But you're just going to get a little more power out of that. And now as we start to get into the overkill setups, this would be one of them, which would be adding another sub over here. This is, you can see those are two Gen 4s. So what this is going to provide, it's first of all, it's going to come in at about, I think it's 3,500-ish. And so what it's going to do is it's going to even out your bass a little bit within the room. It'll be a little more spread out, and it'll give you that little bit more kick, which should be noticeable. Then again, you are spending an extra $800 for one of these. So we're starting to really get into the point of diminishing returns at this point here. What I'd actually recommend over this setup, which is actually, it's just a tiny bit more expensive, would actually be to not have that sub, get two more eras. And so I actually tried this setup a couple weeks ago at my friend's place. We watched Top Gun Maverick on it, and this sounded nuts because it just gives you the front firing up in the front, in the back, then you get the front firing from the Arc, then you get the sub. With the Dolby Atmos setup, this is just a really, really insane. I think it's one of the best wireless solutions you can get in a home setup currently. If you want the most immersive setup, that's gonna run you about $3,600 with the Sub Gen 4 and then the 4 Era 300s and the Arc Ultra. But then if you truly want a endgame sort of setup, adding another Sub Gen 4 is going to give you a more balanced bass response in this system, but that will certainly come at a cost. In terms of placement, you should note that you generally don't want to block the top of the Arc Ultra, like in this configuration at my parents' place. This is an example of where they chose aesthetics over performance, and the installers built a mesh cage around the Sonos. So hopefully that helps you with the configurations. Obviously there's slightly different permutations of things you could do here, but I think this is probably the most logical progression of upgrades that you would want to do. My friend has this setup and I've tested this one, except he's got one sub, not the two subs. But he did actually send me a really good video of someone who tests this stuff in the home theater business, and he had this setup. So I'll link that video below if you want to check out that guy's exact setup like this. In a lot of these scenarios, before upgrading some of the types of different speakers or subs that you have, you might be better off to have some sound treatment in the room before upgrading certain things, so you can get that better acoustic environment. To some people's dismay, the Sonos app went through an overhaul, but I've seen some improvements over time. Adding new devices and grouping speakers is simple enough. You can easily add Amazon Alexa or Sonos voice control too. Two important features I discovered recently are the clear dialogue mode and the night sound mode, which can be useful as to not disturb family or neighbors. The most important feature in the app is the True Play, however. It's an advanced tuning software that lets you use your iOS device microphone to map the room shape and speaker placement.
With frickin' laser beams.
The Arc Ultra is a really impressive piece of kit, and I look forward to seeing maybe how the Mayht integration might be introduced in new speakers from Sonos, either for the home setup or for other things like I mentioned, like glasses, mini speakers, car setups. I think this is a really revolutionary technology in the sound field and is something that we're going to continue to see a lot. If you already have an Arc, then your money might be better spent getting some rears or a sub. But if you are just getting a standalone unit, then the Arc Ultra is certainly the way to go. Or if you want some room to grow, get the Arc Ultra and then upgrade later. And I think you'll have a great experience with your Sonos home theater setup. If you want to see the Frame Pro TV that you see in some of these shots, I'm working on that right now. So when it's done, I'll put it up here. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.